Hi, welcome back. I'm gonna talk about this book, A Little Life. I just finished this book on the Flixbots. I didn't really film the exact reaction after I finished it because there are just so many people around me. And so I decided to make a video to talk about my honest review without giving you any spoilers. And if you haven't read this book, this video may be useful for you to see what you're gonna get yourself into before you start reading it. But if you have read it, I would love to share my thoughts about this book with you. So actually someone commented on my last videos about book recommendation, and they suggested me to read this book because it's one of their favorite books they have read last year. I have heard about this book a few years ago because it was kind of popular. It was pretty trendy at that time. People said it was the saddest book they have ever read, and people have crazy reaction about it. I was a bit skeptical because I was so scared it's gonna be like an overhyped book. It's like 700 pages long, so thick, and I was like, does it worth my time? But this year I just decided to give it a try. So here we go. So what makes the book sad? People just keep talking about how sad it is. So this storyline, or even the story plot, kind of surround about 4 friends, but it's mostly about one person who is Jude. And the story goes along with all the people that kind of connected to him. There are definitely so much trigger warning in this book. It covers suicidal attempts, physical and sexual abuse, mental health issues. So this is definitely not a book for everyone. It deals with a lot of traumatic memories. I understand that not everyone will able to handle it, and not everyone wanted to experience this when you're reading, because I do understand that sometimes you just want to escape your reality when you are reading, that you wanted to read something that is fun, lighthearted, heartwarming. So this book is definitely not that. It triggers so much of your emotion, but in general, I would not describe this book as the most depressed book. I'd rather describe it as the most touching, moving book that I've ever read. It is really intense and really bold. The author did not just throw the saddest thing that you can ever imagine into the storyline and just make this book sad and touching. Indeed, the awful things that I have mentioned in this book is really hard to digest, but when you line them up together, the sad and the happy things of this book kind of make the character and the story plot even more complete. So it's kind of like a sculpture. Before you finish a sculpture, those bits and pieces that you're working on, they looks really awful, but after the whole sculpture is completed, everything makes sense. So that's what I felt about this book. When you just look at those awful plots itself, they look terrible, but after the whole stories are completed, you feel like they happen for a reason. And I also want to talk about the title of the book. This is the best title that I have ever read. So I feel like there are 2 different meanings of why the author called this A Little Life, and this is the genius thing. Very obvious meaning of A Little Life is referring to the life of Jude, the main character, because he has a really damaged soul, so he sees himself worthless, meaningless, and so that's why he thinks his life is just so little. He doesn't deserve all the happy things. But his life seems so little, but at the same time there's so much going on. He experienced the worst part and also the best thing that everyone could ever ask for in their life. So his little life is actually not little at all. The second meaning of A Little Life, I feel like it's referring to the action of reading this book, because while you're reading it, it's like you are living another version of a life. Because it's so beautifully written, it's almost feel like you're being part of the life that this book is talking about. It triggers so much of my emotions. I have to gasp for breath when I was reading it. It gives me chills. I felt just really touched by the characters so much. I felt so connected to them. It feels like I was a part of this life. So the action of reading this book has become alive, I would say. It's like I'm holding a life on my hands when I was reading it. Generally, this book is just beautifully written. It's a book about life, love, friendship, family, and how people grieve, how people deal with traumas, how people move on. And as you can see, I highlighted so much in this book. I feel like it's the most highlighted book that I've ever had. And those words that are just so beautifully written, and I wish that I could write something like that in my life. And I would love to share it with you guys, some of my favorite quotes that I have in this book. So if you're interested on my reading journey, you can keep watching. I'm gonna have some of the honest reaction while I was reading different chapters of this book, and I would also share with some of these meaningful quotes that I've encountered while I was reading it. So if you're interested, just keep watching. Or even if you have read the book, I am also really interested in how you feel about this book as well, whether you like it or you hate it. Or if you haven't read this book, I hope this video would encourage you to try to read it. Or if you feel like, oh, this is not really my cup of tea, I don't want to go for something that is so sad or emotional for me, that's totally fine. And I still wanted to give you the best quotes of this book that I have read. So I hope you like it. And in general, I love this book so much. It's like strict 5 stars for me. It's one of my favorite books I've read so far, even though it's only April, but this is top 1. It has beat the other book that I also love, which is Talking at Night. This is number 1 for now. It's just so good. It's just so good. I loved it. It's so special. I've never read any book like that before. So yeah. Things get broken, and sometimes they get repaired. And in most cases, you realize that no matter what gets damaged, life rearranges itself to compensate for your loss, sometimes wonderfully. It's so windy. It rained all of a sudden and then I'm all wet. I hate the weather in here, honestly. It's already March, but then it's still like so cold. It's like 2 to 10 degrees. It's so annoying. It's so cold. I'm now at page 130, and so far so good. So for the first 100 pages it has been quite good, so I get to really know about the character, have more chance to really understand and get to know the character really well. At first they don't really talk about specific characters, so they just give you a general idea that they're living together or they are like a really good friends. The more you read, the more you got to know about the individual stories of the characters. Now I guess I'm getting to know about what happened to Jude, like what happened to him in the past, and kind of like his relationship with the other friends as well. I've been enjoying it so far, so we'll see how it goes for the second 100 pages. I'm now on chapter 2, The Postman, which is around 150 page. I'm reading about his childhood memories, and I get to know more about what happened when he was a young kid. So yeah, it was kind of like start peeling off each layer of his past and history. It was pretty good. It wasn't anything too depressed, and I enjoy it. I just get really curious about his past and his experience and so on. So yeah, nothing too bad so far. It's Easter holiday today and the weather is so bad. It has been raining for the entire day until now. The sun is coming back, but it's already like 6 p.m. so I couldn't really go out. So I stay at home the entire day. I did some of my work, my studies, study for a bit, and I make a giant loaf of banana bread. It smells so good. It's actually quite successful. I decided to read a bit for the evening, have a cup of tea just to get myself cozy. I can maybe read a bit from A Little Life. Being with you is like being in this fantastic landscape, he continues slowly. You think it's one thing, a forest, and then suddenly it changes, and now it's a meadow, or a jungle, or cliffs of ice, and they are all beautiful, but they are strange as well. And you don't have a map, and you don't understand how you got from one terrain to the next so abruptly. And you don't know when the next transition will arrive, and you don't have any of the equipment you need, and so you keep walking through and trying to adjust as you go, but you don't really know what you're doing, and often you make mistakes, bad mistakes. That's sometimes what it feels like. Wanted to give like a little update on chapter 3. Chapter 3 is called Vanities, and it's about another character, which is JB. I like the writing style of it because I get to know more about different characters other than Jude. I feel like for the first 200 pages I really do understand Jude's personality and what his struggles. So now we get to see more about the struggles of different characters. I guess that's how it's gonna be. Like, it's gonna touch upon different characters, what's their struggles and their dilemmas at different stage of their life. Relationships never provide you with everything. They provide you with some things. You take all the things you want from a person. Sexual chemistry, let's say, or a good conversation, or financial support, or intellectual compatibility, or niceness, or loyalty. And you get to pick 3 of those things. 3, that's it. Maybe 4 if you're lucky. The rest you have to look for elsewhere. It's only in the movies that you find someone who gives you all of those things. But this isn't the movies. In the real world, you have to identify which 3 qualities you want to spend the rest of your life with, and then you look for those qualities in another person. That's real life. Don't you see it's a trap? If you keep trying to find everything, you will wind up with nothing. I feel like the author did a really good job when writing about or even doing the narration of what happened to Jude, because she didn't do in a really graphic approach. She sort of tells you in a really indirect way, and also leaves some space for your own imagination. But again, I feel like because of this approach, it makes the story even more impactful, because you couldn't help to imagine or even think about what's happening to him. So That was a really good writing, but at the same time, this writing style will make you even more depressed because you couldn't help just keep thinking about the words that the author used and all the lines. You could really feel the weight of words in this chapter. As you got older, you realized that the qualities you valued in the people you slept with or dated weren't necessarily the ones you wanted to live with or be with. If you were smart enough, if you were lucky, you learned this and accept this. You figure out what was most important to you, and you looked for it, and you learned to be realistic.